On Wednesday afternoon, July 10th, we flew from Kiev to Vilnius, the capital city of Lithuania. Although the flight was a relatively short one, getting through passport control in Vilnius was a nightmare of confusion. So all we were able to do the rest of the day was get checked into our very nice hotel, have dinner, and get to bed. We had a walking tour of the old town of Vilnius scheduled for early the next morning. Gediminas was a 14th century Grand Duke who is credited with founding the political entity known as Lithuania and expanding its territory from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. He is seen as one of the most significant individuals in early Lithuanian history. He was a champion of paganism and successfully diverted attempts to Christianize his country by skillful negotiations with the Pope and other Christian leaders. The Cathedral of Vilnius, the main Roman Catholic cathedral of Lithuania, is dedicated to Saints Stanislaus and Ladislaus. Originally the site of pagan worship, the Lithuanian king Mindaugas ordered the construction of the original cathedral in 1251, after his conversion to Christianity. After his death in 1263, the first cathedral again became a place of pagan worship. In 1387, the year in which Lithuania was officially converted to Christianity, a new cathedral was built. It has been rebuilt or modified several times since then. During the Soviet regime, the cathedral was converted into a warehouse. Masses were finally celebrated again starting in 1985, and in 1989 its status as a cathedral was restored. Vilnius University is the oldest university in the Baltic states and one of the oldest in all of Northern Europe. It is the largest university in Lithuania. It was founded in 1579 as the Jesuit Academy of Vilnius by the King of Poland and the Grand Duke of Lithuania. The Church of St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist is actually more than 100 years older than the university, but was incorporated into it when the university was established. Originally built in the 14th century and having gone through many reconstructions through the years, the presidential palace became the official residence of the President of Lithuania in 1997. A funny thing happened while we were there. I and two others from our group went up to the gate to take pictures of the courtyard between the vertical rails of the gate and apparently triggered the opening mechanism. Two guards then rushed us with very stern looks on their faces. Nobody said a word, but I think both we and the guards were equally shocked. Having been approached by a hooker outside our hotel the night before, all I could think of was that not only do I apparently look like a dirty old man, I guess I also look like a terrorist. All of the magnificent carvings and sculptures in the Church of Saints Peter and Paul are stucco. There is no marble at all.
Slow.
15th century Trakai Castle, about 17 miles outside Vilnius, was completed by Vytautas the Great, having been begun in the late 14th century by his father Kęstutis. Vytautas, considered one of the most famous rulers of medieval Lithuania, was the ruler from 1392 to 1430 of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. In modern times, he is revered as a national hero. He died inside the castle in 1430. Trakai was one of the main centers of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, and the castle held great strategic importance. Near the castle is a small settlement of non-Palestinian Jews known as Karaims, or Crimean Karaites. The Karaim were brought to Trakai from Crimea in the 14th century to serve as bodyguards for the Trakai royalty. Karaism is distinct from mainstream rabbinic Judaism and does not recognize the Talmud or other post-biblical writings as scripture. Individual Karaites may use such writings as a resource in understanding God's will, but the sole authority remains the Torah. Karaites were once a significant proportion of the Jewish population, but today only about 30 to 50,000 are thought to reside in Israel, with smaller communities in Turkey, Europe, and the United States. However, the actual number is hard to determine because they believe on the basis of Genesis 32 that counting Jews is forbidden. We had a make-it-yourself lunch of delicious meat pies at the Karaim restaurant. Back in Vilnius, we visited the Museum of Genocide Victims, the KGB Museum, another highlight of the entire trip. This building has a sordid history. During the 19th century, Lithuania was part of the Russian Empire. The building, completed in 1890, originally housed the court of the Russian Governor General. The German Empire used it during its World War I occupation of the country. For a brief time after the end of that war, the building was used as a conscription center for the newly formed, although short-lived, Lithuanian Army, and as the Vilnius Commander's headquarters. In 1920, during the Lithuanian Wars of Independence, the city was briefly taken by the Bolsheviks, and the building housed commissariats and a revolutionary tribunal. Then Vilnius and its surroundings were incorporated into Poland, and the building housed the courts of justice for the Polish Governor General. Lithuania was invaded by the Soviet Union in 1940, and following an ultimatum became a Soviet Socialist Republic. Mass arrests and deportations followed, and the building's basement became a prison. In 1941, Nazi Germany invaded the country. The building then housed the Gestapo headquarters. The Soviets retook the country in 1944, and from then until independence was reestablished in 1991, the building was used by the KGB, housing offices, a prison, and an interrogation center. Over 1,000 prisoners were executed in the basement between 1944 and the early 1960s, about 1/3 for resisting the occupation. In addition to housing the museum, the building now serves as a courthouse and as the repository of the Lithuanian Special Archives. Between 1944 and 1953, 362 priests were arrested, along with other clergy and lay people as well. All in all, about 20% of the clergy suffered under the Soviets. Priests and nuns who worked underground were the most active participants in the peaceful resistance between the 60s and the 80s. This is one of the grimmest places in the prison. The walls are padded and soundproofed. The straitjacket was used for those who resisted or were deranged from torture. The padded walls absorbed their cries and shouts for help. 5 cells like this one are mentioned in prison records, though no mention is made of how they were equipped. They were probably all cells for torture. Just like the ordinary solitary confinement cells, those with water were used to serve the same purpose: discipline. Inmates had either to stand in ice-cold water, ice in the wintertime, or balance themselves on a low, small, round platform in the middle of the floor. They would fall into the water every time they lost their balance. These cells were built in 1945 and used as such until the early 1950s. Deep in the basement level of the building is the execution chamber, its walls still marred by bullets used to execute prisoners. Up to 40 prisoners may have been executed in one single night. In the official KGB plan of the building, the execution room was labeled as the kitchen. Between 1944 and 1962, more than 1,000 prisoners were executed in this room and later buried in mass graves outside the city, the bodies being dragged out through the narrow window. Objects found in these mass graves are now on display beneath the glass covering of the floor. Initially, there were 4 and then later 5 courtyards, separated by 10 feet high wooden walls topped with barbed wire. In Stalin's time, the inmates were allowed to walk for 10 to 15 minutes a day, each time in circles with their hands always behind their backs. No talking was allowed. One guard was stationed at the door to the yard while another watched them through a wire net above. With the softening of the regime after Stalin's death, prisoners were allowed to walk up to 1 hour, sit down, and even exercise. Our guide in the museum was a University of Florida student from Tampa, Florida, doing some kind of internship in Vilnius over the summer. His parents actually were both Lithuanian, and although he spent some time in Lithuania as a child, he was born in the States and is an American citizen. He proved to be an excellent guide, and of course it didn't hurt that he spoke accent-free English. Užupis is a neighborhood in the old town of Vilnius. It is popular with artists and has been compared to Montmartre in Paris. Užupis is quite small and isolated. Of its 7,000 inhabitants, nearly 1,000 are artists. Originally mostly a Jewish area, the majority of the Jewish populace was killed during the Holocaust. In 1997, the residents of the area declared the Republic of Užupis, along with its own flag, currency, president, cabinet of ministers, constitution, national anthem, and army. numbering approximately 11 men. They celebrate this independence annually on, of all days, April Fool's Day, but it is known there as Užupis Day. On April 1st, 2002, a statue of the Archangel Gabriel was unveiled in the main square. It symbolizes the revival and artistic freedom of Eastern Europe. The official motto of Užupis is "Don't fight, don't win, don't surrender." The Constitution, displayed prominently throughout the area, has such articles as "Man has the right to individuality." People have the right to live by the River Vilma, while the River Vilma has the right to flow past the people. A dog has the right to be a dog. People have the right to have no rights. People have the right to be happy, and people have the right to be unhappy. In summary, it declares people's right to either do or not do something according to their desire.